Haelor Empire's fatal mistake, attacking a human vessel. HFY. The Haelor Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. An advanced, technologically superior race. They had wiped out countless civilizations across the galaxy. Their fleets were an unstoppable force. Their weapons capable of vaporizing entire worlds with a single shot. Their arrogance matched their power, and they had long believed that no species could challenge them. Then, the humans came. At first, the Haelor dismissed them as a primitive species. They had only just begun to venture into space, their ships slow and clunky compared to the sleek, lightning-fast Haelor warships. Their technology was nowhere near as advanced, and their weapons were laughable in comparison to the Empire's might. But as time passed, the Haelor began to notice something unsettling. Humans were resilient, resourceful, and, most disturbingly, fearless. They survived attacks that would have obliterated lesser species and grew stronger with every encounter. No matter how many ships the Haelor destroyed, more humans appeared from the depths of space, armed with new, devastating technologies. And then came the fateful day when the Haelor decided to make an example of humanity. A small, unassuming human vessel, one that looked like it could barely hold together, was spotted drifting near a Haelor trade route. The Haelor fleet, hungry for any opportunity to show their superiority, moved in for the kill. The humans, as expected, did not surrender. Instead, they sent a single transmission. "We do not fear you." The Haelor commander, Haelor, sneered. "Prepare to obliterate them. Let this be a lesson to the lesser species that dare challenge the Haelor." The Haelor ships locked onto the human vessel and unleashed their full firepower. The beam weapons rained down, the energy blasts powerful enough to shatter entire moons. The human ship, however, did something unexpected. It didn't explode. It didn't even seem to slow down. In fact, the Haelor ships began to notice something bizarre. Their weapons were having little effect. Before they could react, the human ship launched something, a small, seemingly insignificant projectile. The Haelor commanders laughed, assuming it was a desperate attempt at retaliation. They soon realized their mistake. The projectile collided with one of the Haelor ships, and in an instant, the once mighty vessel was engulfed in a blinding flash of light. The humans had developed a weapon, a small device that emitted a high-energy pulse that could bypass the Haelor's shields and directly target the ship's core. Within moments, half of the Haelor fleet was crippled, their advanced technology reduced to a heap of burning wreckage. Panic spread through the remaining Haelor vessels as they tried to flee, but the human ship pursued them relentlessly. It wasn't long before the human ship locked onto the Haelor command vessel, a massive warship with thick armor and layers of defensive systems. The Haelor believed it was invulnerable, but the humans had a surprise in store. The human ship fired a series of devastating missiles that pierced the command vessel's defenses. Haelor's ship shuddered violently as explosions ripped through its hull. The Haelor commander attempted to send out a distress signal, but it was too late. The human ship's final strike tore through the heart of the Haelor warship, sending it into a fiery death spiral. The surviving Haelor fleet scattered, defeated and humiliated. The humans had not only survived, but had struck back with a fury that even the Haelor could not comprehend. Back on Earth, the message was clear. Humanity, though young in the grand scheme of the galaxy, was not to be underestimated. The Haelor Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had attacked a human vessel, and in doing so, they had awakened the true power of humanity. As the Haelor fleet limped away, the galaxy took notice. The Haelor Empire's once untouchable reputation was shattered, and the humans? They had only just begun. Haelor Empire's fatal mistake, attacking a human vessel. HFY Part 2. The Haelor Empire, once the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy, were now in a state of chaos. Their fleet had been shattered, their flagship destroyed, and their pride utterly broken. The news of their defeat spread quickly across the galaxy, and in its wake, a new power began to rise. The humans, the very species the Haelor had underestimated, had delivered a blow that not only crippled their military might but also shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. Back on Earth, the victory was celebrated, but the humans, far from resting on their laurels, immediately began preparing for the war that was sure to follow. The Haelor had made one mistake, but the galaxy was still filled with threats, and while humanity's message was clear, They knew they had to solidify their position among the stars. The Haelor would not take this defeat lightly, and it was only a matter of time before they would retaliate. In a massive underground facility in the deserts of Nevada, the human governments, unified for the first time, convened to discuss the future. "Haelor is not dead," said General Alexandra Westbrook, one of Earth's foremost military leaders. "We may have crippled their fleet, but the Haelor are not a species to simply bow their heads and fade away. They will regroup. They will retaliate. And we need to be ready. We've made incredible strides since the first engagement," said Dr. Alan Kwok, a leading scientist and inventor. "The weapon we used against them, the pulse disruptor, was just the beginning. We've reverse-engineered their tech, and I believe we can weaponize it further. Our new ship designs are already being tested. We'll have a fleet that can take on any force in the galaxy, including the Haelor." But it wasn't just about weaponry. Humanity's greatest strength, as Haelor had learned too late, wasn't merely in their technology, it was in their unity. The human race, once fractured by petty conflicts, now stood together under a common banner. They were resourceful, adaptable, and most dangerous of all, determined. As Earth's leaders discussed strategies for the coming war, word arrived from the Haelor Empire. Their emperor, Zornarek, had called for a summit of the galaxy's most powerful species, inviting all factions to witness the fall of humanity. He promised retaliation, but more importantly, he would call for the annihilation of the human race. The Haelor had every intention of making sure humanity's victory was nothing more than a brief moment in history. But the humans weren't about to sit idly by. General Westbrook addressed the council in front of an enormous video screen. "This is what they want, to drag us into a war where they can crush us. We can't fight them on their terms. We need to hit them where they are weakest, their hubris. We'll show them that humanity is not just a species they can crush. We are the future. We know their tactics." Dr. Kwok added, "The Haelor are predictable in their arrogance. They believe that sheer force will win the day. But we've already shown that their technology is vulnerable. Their overconfidence is their greatest weakness." With that, the humans set their sights on the Haelor's homeworld, Haeloria. It was heavily guarded, a fortress planet, with millions of Haelor ships orbiting in defense. But humanity had a secret weapon, an alliance of rebel factions from various parts of the galaxy. Many species had long resented Haelor rule, and now, they saw an opportunity to break free from their oppressors. A fleet of human and rebel ships, made up of every species the Haelor had wronged, set course for Haeloria. The mission was simple: infiltrate, strike hard, and send a message that the Haelor Empire was no longer the apex predator of the galaxy. The human fleet, now equipped with the latest technologies stolen, adapted, and invented, approached Haeloria with a level of stealth that even the Haelor's advanced sensors couldn't detect. They slipped past the outer defenses, moving into the heart of the planet's system. Inside the command center of Haeloria, Emperor Zornarek watched the approaching fleet with a cold, calculating gaze. His pride had been deeply wounded by the defeat at the hands of these humans, and now he would make them pay. "What are they thinking?" he muttered to his generals. "Do they believe they can defeat us here, on our homeworld?" "They are too bold," one of his officers replied. "But let them come. They will be crushed." Zornarek turned toward his fleet, which was now preparing for the inevitable battle. But then, something unexpected happened. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, swarming the Haelor fleet. At first, it seemed like a standard assault, but then the Haelor realized the horrifying truth: they were not just facing a few ships. They were facing an entire battle strategy built around exploiting their every weakness. The human ships, agile, unpredictable, and well-coordinated, sliced through the Haelor defenses like a hot knife through butter. They used the same pulse disruptors that had crippled the Haelor fleet months before, and soon, the Empire's once mighty ships began to flicker and fall. The Haelor fleet, unable to adapt, was torn apart. "How is this possible?" Emperor Zornarek shouted as his command center shook from the impacts of the battle. "They've adapted," one of his officers said, terror in his voice. "They've learned from every attack we've launched. They know our tactics better than we do." In the midst of the chaos, the human fleet struck at the heart of the Haelor Empire. The pulse disruptors, now modified with the combined knowledge of humans and their rebel allies, severed the life support systems of Haeloria's capital, crippling the planet's infrastructure. Without their central command, the Haelor forces were thrown into disarray. Back on Earth, General Westbrook received the news. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, but the war was far from over. The Haelor might still retaliate, but they had learned a valuable lesson: the humans would never back down. Humanity's victory against the Haelor Empire would be remembered as the turning point in the galaxy. The once mighty empire, shattered by the smallest of mistakes, now faced a future of decline. The humans had proven themselves. They were no longer just a species on the fringes of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. And this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only just begun to carve its place within it. The Haelor made one fatal mistake: they underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, fight, and rise from the ashes of their failures. The galaxy would never forget the day the Haelor learned to fear humans. Haelor Empire's fatal mistake: attacking a human vessel. HFY, Part 3. The destruction of the Haelor fleet and the devastation of Haeloria marked a turning point in galactic history. The once immense empire, which had controlled vast swathes of the galaxy with iron fists and unrivaled power, was now in a state of disarray. Emperor Zorneric, humiliated and crippled, retreated into hiding, his empire fractured and vulnerable. For the first time in millennia, the Haelor were not the undisputed rulers of the stars. But while the Haelor were licking their wounds, the humans had no intention of simply celebrating their victory. General Westbrook and her council of leaders knew that the battle for the galaxy was far from over. The Haelor might be beaten, but they were not defeated. Humanity had proven its resilience and its technological ingenuity, but their true strength lay in the alliances they had forged with other species oppressed by Haelor rule. A new, united front was emerging from the ashes of Haelor tyranny. The rebellion grew as more and more worlds joined the cause. The galaxy, once under the iron fist of the Haelor, was beginning to see the first glimmer of hope in centuries. New alliances were formed, and humanity was at the center of it all, leading the charge toward freedom and justice. The rise of the coalition. Among the first to join the human-led coalition were the Sric, a species of insectoid beings who had suffered under Haelor exploitation for generations. Their homeworld, a lush, jungle-covered planet, had been reduced to a toxic wasteland by Haelor mining operations. Their warriors were skilled in guerrilla tactics, and they were eager to strike back at the empire that had wronged them. Next came the HFY, a highly intelligent aquatic race whose civilizations spanned entire oceanic planets. They had been subdued by Haelor forces through a campaign of mass enslavement. The HFY joined the rebellion, bringing with them advanced underwater warfare technologies and knowledge of stealth operations in hostile environments. Then there were the Athlans, a race of telepathic beings whose psychic abilities had once been the key to maintaining the Haelor's dominance. Under Haelor rule, the Athlans had been manipulated and brainwashed, their powers harnessed for the Empire's expansion. Now freed, they brought their formidable psychic talents to the fight for freedom. Together, these diverse species formed the Galactic Liberation Coalition, an alliance united by the common goal of ridding the galaxy of the Haelor's corrupt and oppressive rule. And at its helm was humanity, a species that had not only survived the Haelor's wrath, but had turned the tide of war in the blink of an eye. But as the coalition grew in strength, so too did the Haelor's determination for revenge. Emperor Zorneric, though humiliated, had not forgotten the humans' defiance. He spent months in hiding, gathering what remained of the Haelor's loyalist factions, rallying his broken empire to fight back against the growing threat. His first step was to form alliances with other galactic warlords, those who saw the humans rise as a threat to their own power. The ZYRXX, a war-hungry race known for their cruelty and aggression, agreed to lend their forces to the Haelor in exchange for control of new worlds once the rebellion was crushed. The Varathians, a monstrous reptilian species with an appetite for conquest, were another ally, offering the Haelor their ruthless military tactics. The Haelor's last stand. As the coalition's fleet grew, the Haelor prepared for their final, desperate strike. Haelor Empire's fatal mistake: attacking a human vessel. HFY, Part 4. The Haelor's last stand continued. As the Haelor gathered their forces, General Westbrook's coalition had already set their trap. The rebels, knowing the Haelor would strike at the heart of their alliance, had devised a brilliant strategy. Humanity's finest minds, bolstered by the ingenuity of the Sric, the KRZI, and the Athelans, had been working in secret, preparing for this decisive moment. The Haelor fleet, led by the now battle-hardened Emperor Zorneric, launched their assault. Hundreds of Haelor and allied ships blotted out the stars as they headed for the coalition's most crucial space station, the Beacon of Hope, the site of humanity's first major victory in the war, the Elysium Base. What the Haelor didn't know was that Elysium Base wasn't just a symbol of human resistance, it was a carefully orchestrated trap, positioned perfectly for an ambush. As the Haelor's fleet moved into range, the coalition's fleet appeared out of nowhere, emerging from hidden positions within asteroid fields and gas clouds. The ambush was set, and the Haelor were walking straight into it. The human vessels, swift and deadly, bore the signature of their earlier victories, sleek and compact ships designed to capitalize on their superior tactics, adaptability, and technology. The Sric, using their expertise in guerrilla warfare, had engineered a series of stealth drones that cloaked the human fleet, rendering it invisible to the Haelor's scanners. The KRZI had created powerful graviton pulses to destabilize enemy ship engines, rendering the Haelor vessels sluggish and vulnerable. But the true key to the human victory was the Athelans. Their psychic powers were the perfect counter to the Haelor's over-reliance on their advanced technologies. As the Haelor ships engaged, the Athelans sent out waves of psychic interference, scrambling the Haelor's navigational systems and communication channels, rendering their ships disoriented and chaotic. The battle that followed was nothing short of a slaughter. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the Haelor fleet found themselves unprepared for the sheer ingenuity of the coalition. The human ships darted through the battlefield with precision, picking off Haelor vessels one by one. The Sric drones swooped in and disabled the larger Haelor warships, while the KRZI's graviton pulses disabled engines, leaving Haelor ships helpless as human forces pounced. Zorneric, aboard his flagship, Imperium, watched in shock as the battle unfolded. His once proud fleet was falling apart before his eyes. His allies, the ZYRXX and Varathians, had joined the fray, but even their cruelty and aggression could not match the coalition's coordination. "We cannot lose this," Zorneric growled, his fists clenched in anger. "Retreat, now." But it was already too late. The human fleet's tactics were simply too much for the Haelor to handle. As Zorneric tried to command his forces to retreat, the Athelans launched another psychic strike, shattering the Haelor flagship's command systems. The Imperium shuddered as its engines faltered, and the once mighty warship was left adrift, vulnerable. With a resounding final blow, the Imperium was torn apart, a flash of light signaling the destruction of the Haelor's command ship. The battle was over. The Haelor had been decisively beaten. The fall of the Haelor Empire. In the aftermath of the battle, the Haelor were left broken, their forces shattered, their empire in ruins, and their leadership scattered. Zorneric, barely escaping the destruction of his flagship, was left to flee into the dark corners of the galaxy. His empire, once an unstoppable force, was now a shell of its former self. For the first time in galactic history, the Haelor Empire had been decisively defeated. Their enemies, humanity, the Sric, the KRZI, and the Athelans, had united under the banner of freedom, toppling the oppressive regime that had held the galaxy in its grasp for centuries. The Galactic Liberation Coalition, with humanity at its core, declared victory. The oppressive reign of the Haelor was over. It was a new era, one where the power dynamics of the galaxy had shifted irreparably. The once feared empire was now a memory, and humanity stood as the beacon of hope for all oppressed species in the galaxy. The Galactic Council convened to establish a new order. The Haelor homeworld of Haeloria was declared a neutral zone, its resources shared among the galaxy's many species. Former Haelor territories were divided among the liberated races, and humanity emerged not as conquerors, but as leaders of a new galactic alliance. General Westbrook, standing beside leaders of the Sric, KRZI, and Athelans, addressed the council in the newly formed capital of the Galactic Coalition. "This victory is not just ours," she said, "it belongs to all of us, to every species who refused to bow to tyranny, who fought back against the darkness. Today, we stand together as equals. Today, the galaxy is free." Her words resonated throughout the galaxy. The Haelor had made a fatal mistake, underestimating humanity. But that mistake had led to their undoing. The human race, with its adaptability, unity, and refusal to be broken, had reshaped the galaxy, and now it stood as the cornerstone of a new era. For the Haelor, there was only the bitter taste of defeat. For the humans and their allies, the stars had never felt so bright. The galaxy was theirs now, and they had proven that no empire, no matter how mighty, was invincible. The galaxy belonged to those who dared to fight, and the humans had shown that they would never stop. And this was only the beginning. The Haelor had made their mistake, humanity had learned from it, and their future in the stars was just beginning to unfold. Haelor Empire's fatal mistake, attacking a human vessel. HFY, Part 5. The Rise of the Human Dominion. As the dust settled over the ruins of the Haelor Empire, the galaxy began to shift in ways none could have predicted. The Galactic Liberation Coalition, forged in the fires of war, now faced the monumental task of rebuilding. But the humans, having proven themselves as not only survivors but victors, were already looking beyond the ashes of their past. They had accomplished the unimaginable. The defeat of the Haelor had proven humanity's strength, unity, and unyielding will. The coalition's leadership, with General Westbrook as one of its leading figures, began to formalize the governance of the new order. But it wasn't just a question of power sharing. This new era was to be built upon cooperation, and humanity was at the helm. We have already seen what happens when we unite. General Westbrook spoke in front of the newly formed Galactic Council. We destroyed an empire, but that was only the first step. We have a galaxy to rebuild, and we need to lead, not as rulers, but as partners. However, not all were in agreement. The ZYRXX, a brutal and cunning race, had sided with the Haelor out of opportunism, and they were beginning to show their dissatisfaction with the new human-led order. They had fought alongside the Haelor, and now they found themselves sidelined, their ambitions thwarted by the rise of humanity. The ZYRXX leader, General Vrax, stood on the fringes of the council chambers, his eyes burning with the desire for retribution. The ZYRXX were no strangers to treachery, and their sense of betrayal ran deep. They are weak, Vrax muttered to his advisors. They think they've won, but their victory was nothing but a fluke. They may have defeated the Haelor, but they are not invincible. I will ensure they understand that. But the ZYRXX were not the only ones planning in the shadows. Even as the humans and their allies worked to consolidate power, whispers of a new threat began to spread. The shadow of the Varathians. Far from the council chambers, in the depths of an unknown star system, the Varathians were preparing. The reptilian species, savage and war-hungry, had been instrumental in the Haelor's final push against the coalition. But like the ZYRXX, they too felt their dominance slipping away. The Varathian leader, King Rithik, had watched the Haelor fall from the sidelines. Despite the defeat of his allies, the Varathians still maintained their warlike nature, and now, they were gathering an army to challenge the new order that humanity had helped forge. The humans have learned how to fight, Rithik growled to his war council, but they have yet to learn how to conquer. We shall show them the true meaning of power. We shall strike before they can unite all the forces against us. To make matters worse, the remaining Haelor loyalists, those who had escaped the destruction of their homeworld, had begun regrouping under a new leader, a former Haelor admiral named Nkai, who had been part of Zorneric's inner circle. Unlike Zorneric, Nkai was calculating and ruthless, and he had no intention of letting the Haelor Empire die. Nkai rallied the remnants of the Haelor fleet and a dozen smaller factions, all still loyal to the old empire, and began a campaign to reclaim their lost territory. But the humans were not blind to these growing threats. The Galactic Coalition had made its presence known, while many of the rebellious factions remained silent or neutral. The diplomatic efforts of humanity, coupled with their newfound military might, made it clear that the galaxy would no longer tolerate another empire built on tyranny and fear. The Forge of War. In the midst of these mounting threats, the humans took a calculated approach. General Westbrook and her fellow leaders knew that another war could erupt at any moment, and the stakes would be far higher than before. The galaxy, still reeling from the Haelor War, now stood on the brink of yet another conflict. Humanity's response was swift and calculated. The Dominion fleet, the pride of the newly formed human dominion, began to grow. Earth's military-industrial complex had transformed in the wake of the Haelor War, producing fleets of ships and advanced technologies that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. The pulse disruptors that had proven so effective against the Haelor were now being mass-produced, while new innovations in AI, propulsion systems, and energy weapons gave humanity an edge over any foe. But humanity knew that brute force alone would not secure their future. Diplomacy became just as important as warfare. Human diplomats, accompanied by members of the coalition races, spread across the galaxy, forging alliances and brokering peace. They reached out to former Haelor subjects, offering protection and autonomy in exchange for support against the growing threats from the ZYRXX, the Varathians, and the Haelor remnants. While the Dominion fleet grew in strength, so did the rival factions. The ZYRXX, under General Vrax, launched a series of attacks against smaller coalition worlds, testing humanity's resolve. The Varathians, led by King Rithik, began gathering their forces on the fringes of coalition space, preparing for an all-out war. And Admiral Nkai, leading the Haelor loyalists, had begun making covert strikes against key coalition installations, spreading chaos and fear. His fleet, though outnumbered, was still formidable, and he knew the Haelor's legacy could be resurrected if the coalition could be destabilized. But humanity, ever adaptable and determined, responded with precision. The first major conflict broke out in the outskirts of the galaxy as the ZYRXX launched an assault on a former Haelor colony now under human protection. The battle, though brutal, ended in a decisive human victory. General Westbrook, commanding the fleet personally, delivered a message to the ZYRXX: "We will not let you bring chaos to this galaxy. This is your last warning." Meanwhile, the Varathians struck at a coalition research station deep within their territory, hoping to cripple humanity's technological edge. The attack, while damaging, was met with a swift counterattack by the KRZI and SRIC, who used their guerrilla tactics to devastating effect. The Varathians were forced to retreat, their ambitions thwarted for the time being. Back on Earth, the human leadership knew that the galaxy's future depended on more than just military victories. They had learned from the mistakes of the past, and they knew that unity would be the key to their survival. Humanity had not just conquered the Haelor Empire, it had created something far more powerful, a galaxy-wide alliance of species determined to never fall to tyranny again. The war to end all wars. The final stage was beginning. The battle for galactic supremacy was not yet over. But humanity had proven one thing: it was no longer a race to be underestimated. The Haelor's fatal mistake, attacking a human vessel, had irrevocably changed the galaxy. And now, humanity's dominance was all but assured. The galaxy would watch in awe, as humanity, united with their allies, faced the last remnants of tyranny. And in the end, the galaxy would remember the day when the Haelor made their fatal mistake, when they underestimated humanity. And humanity rose from the ashes to shape the stars. Haelor Empire's fatal mistake, attacking a human vessel. HFY, Part 6. The final confrontation. As the ZYRXX, Varathians, and Haelor remnants prepared for the final assault, the galaxy's fragile peace teetered on the edge of destruction. The human-led Galactic Dominion, forged from the ashes of the Haelor Empire, stood as the last bastion of freedom. But the threats surrounding it had grown stronger, bolder. General Westbrook, though already celebrated as a hero, knew the galaxy was far from secure. The ZYRXX, ever the opportunists, had been harassing the Dominion's borders with hit-and-run tactics, their skirmishes growing bolder by the day. Meanwhile, King Rithik's Varathians were not content with mere raids. They had begun massing their fleet on the fringes of Dominion space, preparing for what they considered the final reckoning. And Nkai, the Haelor admiral, had been ruthlessly consolidating his forces in secret, planning a campaign to reclaim his empire's glory. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The strategy of unity. But unlike previous conflicts, this time humanity would not fight alone. The Galactic Dominion had learned the lessons of unity. The once disjointed species that had suffered under the Haelor's rule now stood together, more united than ever. The KRZI, with their underwater tactics and unparalleled knowledge of stealth warfare, would strike first. crippling enemy fleets before they could organize. The SRIC, experts in guerrilla tactics, would sabotage supply lines, leaving the enemy starved for resources and unable to sustain a prolonged conflict. The Athelans, using their powerful psychic abilities, would sow confusion within the ranks of the enemy, disrupting their communications and spreading fear and doubt. General Westbrook, now a seasoned leader, had crafted a brilliant plan. The key to victory lay in the human fleet, which had grown in strength since the defeat of the Haelor. Humanity's technological edge, combined with the ingenuity of their allies, had made their ships nearly invincible. The Dominion fleet was fast, powerful, and equipped with weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Yet, for all their power, Westbrook knew the coalition's victory would rely not just on force, but on strategy, deception, and the ability to strike where the enemy was most vulnerable. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Westbrook said, addressing her council. "We're fighting for the future of the galaxy, for every race that stood with us, for every world that has tasted freedom. We will show them that humanity does not fall. We rise." The final offensive. The time had come. The coalition forces, under humanity's leadership, mobilized across the galaxy. The ZYRXX, the Varathians, and the Haelor loyalists had formed a massive warfront, planning a multi-pronged assault on the heart of the Dominion. The attack was set to begin at the mining colonies of Vardes 7, a strategically important system located on the edge of human-controlled space. The colonies held vast resources critical to the Dominion's war effort. The coalition had one final shot, with their enemies thinking they would strike at Vardes 7 directly. Humanity and its allies staged a feint, an attack on the ZYRXX-held planet of Vraxtor, a distant world known for its natural resources. The plan was simple: lure the ZYRXX and Varathians into a defensive posture, drawing their fleets away from Vardes 7, and then strike decisively at their vulnerable rear. It was a risky maneuver. The ZYRXX had a history of being unpredictable, and the Varathians were a brutal, savage force with no mercy for their enemies. But the coalition had become a formidable fighting force, and they had one thing the enemy lacked: unity and resolve. The battle for Vraxtor began with a spectacular show of force. The ZYRXX, thinking they had once again caught the coalition off guard, were unprepared for the strength of the coalition's counterstrike. The human-led fleet, supported by the KRZI, SRIC, and Athelans, tore through the ZYRXX defenses with lightning speed. Ships darted through space like predators, picking off ZYRXX vessels one by one. The turning tide. But the true turning point came when the Varathian fleet arrived to reinforce the ZYRXX, expecting to overwhelm the coalition with their overwhelming numbers. The Varathians found themselves ensnared by the coalition's trap. The SRIC, using their guerrilla tactics, had already placed explosive devices in the asteroids surrounding the battlefield, and the KRZI deployed gravitational pulses to destabilize Varathian ships, making them easy targets. Meanwhile, the Athelans' psychic powers sowed confusion among the Varathian fleet. The Varathians, known for their aggression and bloodlust, were suddenly plunged into disarray. Their communication systems malfunctioned as Athelans reached into their minds, disorienting their soldiers and creating waves of doubt. The Varathian warriors, once a terrifying force, turned on each other in panic, their resolve shattered. And then, the final blow came. General Westbrook, commanding the Dominion fleet, made her move. With unparalleled precision, she led a devastating attack on the ZYRXX and Varathian capital ships. Human ships, faster and more agile than anything the enemy had, struck with surgical precision, eliminating their flagships. The Dominion fleet tore through the heart of the enemy alliance in a series of deadly, coordinated strikes. In the midst of the chaos, Nkai, the last hope of the Haelor remnants, watched in horror as his allies crumbled. His own fleet was scattered, his ships falling one by one under the combined might of the coalition. The Haelor, once the galaxy's most feared empire, were now nothing more than a footnote in history. Nkai's final attempt to salvage his plans ended in failure. As he attempted to rally his forces for a final strike, a psychic attack from the Athelans crippled his command ship, leaving him with no way to coordinate the attack. The remnants of the Haelor fleet, isolated and broken, were destroyed. The dawn of a new era. With the destruction of the ZYRXX and Varathian fleets, and the final fall of the Haelor remnants. The war was over. The last vestiges of resistance had been shattered, and the coalition emerged victorious. The galaxy had been reshaped, and its future was no longer controlled by empires of tyranny, but by the free peoples of the stars, united under the banner of the human dominion. The victorious leaders of the coalition convened, and General Westbrook addressed the council one final time. "We have won this war not because we were the strongest," she said, "but because we believed in each other. We fought as one, and we have proved that no force, no empire, no tyrant can ever break our will. This is the dawn of a new era, an era where the stars belong to those who fight for freedom, unity, and justice." The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. It was no longer a place where the strong dominated the weak. Now, it was a place where unity, courage, and hope would lead the way. And humanity? Humanity had shown the galaxy that its greatest strength was not in its weapons or technology, but in its ability to rise when all seemed lost, and to stand together against any foe, no matter how great. The Haelor had made their fatal mistake, and in doing so, had given humanity the chance to rise. Now, the stars belonged to humanity and its allies, and the galaxy would never be the same.